Hello, my name's John Gill. I'm a graphic designer and illustrator based in St Andrews, Scotland, currently studying a Masters in Design at Duncan of Jordenston College of Art and Design in Dundee. This is a presentation that I gave at the Open for Education conference in May 2001 in Edinburgh, titled The Creativity Mystery of the QR Code. A QR code I would characterise just now as being the typical awkward teenager. A bit funny looking, its future is uncertain, but as it's maturing it's getting a little bit more popular. This is the sort of barcode that we're more familiar with from our crisp packets and cans of pop. A 1D barcode, and it's scanned horizontally to capture the information. The QR code is a 2D barcode. It's scanned horizontally and vertically, and this illustration shows you the necessary information in every single barcode, but it also shows it in the greyed out areas where your information is embedded when you add your text or your URL, your web address, and so on. What I want to look at is how these QR codes can be used creatively. Obviously the object of the presentation at Open for Education was with education in mind, so how can we use these interestingly in the classroom? I think we'll see that in all cases, whenever it's used, that the objectives are usually very similar, and that is engagement. That the QR code is, at the moment, because there's a bit of a novelty factor, it's fairly easy to engage people with it. But I feel that if the ideas are creative enough and the way that we use the QR code is creative enough, then there's no reason why the QR code couldn't have a very long and healthy life. You'll be seeing QR codes more and more often in advertising, and there'll be a link attached to this video in the content below for an advertising example. But again, when we're thinking about education, we're looking at alternatives to advertising. But I would suggest that in both of these examples of videos that I will attach below, the common denominator is that they were both sharing information with the public that ordinarily could be quite awkward to do, but it was done in a very engaging way, and it raises, and both of them have gone a long way to raising awareness about difficult issues, and they've gone about it in a very interesting way. Probably a good idea to pause this video just now and watch the other two, and then come back. Okay, so assuming you've watched those, I think you'll appreciate both of them, like I said, were addressing what potentially could have been awkward issues, but they've addressed them in a very engaging and interesting way. The technology of the QR code wasn't essential to do that. There is other technology that could be replaced, but again, the open in the title of the conference, Open for Education, was relating to open source, and the beauty of the QR code is that it's completely free for all of us to use, and there are other videos on my website that show you just how easy that is. I've been using QR codes in my project for my Masters purely because they were free. Initially I wanted to use GPS, but GPS is a lot more expensive. There aren't any easy ways of attaching GPS content to websites without the help of a developer. QR codes are very simple to use, and me being completely non-tech, even I was able to do it. And so again, in the context of Open for Education and open source materials and resources, the QR code is perfect. What interests me in my project is this idea of space. My definition for space is the area in a story which allows us to engage with it. So the easiest example is a mystery. In a murder mystery, you're being invited to take part in the story by second guessing who the murderer was or how it happened, to somehow solve the mystery in your own mind before the resolution is given at the end of the film. Now, all stories have an element of space, And in most cases, it can be described as mystery, even if it's as something as simple as a romantic comedy. It's probably obvious to you before you even set foot into the theatre that the two lead characters are going to end up together at the end of the movie, but it's how they get there that is important. And there's an element of space there because you're second guessing how are they going to get together. And those are the areas, those are the spaces where we're allowed to participate. That's the area where we can engage with the story. And the less space there is, the less we can engage. I first started using QR codes in games, and I see games as being very effective at telling stories. They follow many of the same structures that a story follows, but there is a large space in the middle of a game, which is where we create the content for the story. So we're given a world, we're given a character, we're given a task, but how those things then come together is purely down to the choices that we make. So half a dozen people could play the same game and you would have half a dozen different stories. And they wouldn't be 100% original, but there would be twists that made them personal to us. And that's what interests us as human beings with games, whether it's a crossword, Ludo, or World of Warcraft. It's the same mechanics are at play. Now, my interest originated in exhibitions that I was putting up using street posters. I wanted to use the outdoor space as the exhibition space. So rather than posters to advertise an event, the posters were the event. But as soon as I started creating maps for these events so that people could find where I'd put the exhibition, and they were dotted all across the city, as you can see on this map here. As soon as I created a map, I realised that this is very close to a treasure hunt. You've got to explore this space and this map to find the locations. And I thought I could actually turn this into a bit more of a game, and that would make it even more engaging. So the first concept that I came up with was Neon Nights, and I did this in collaboration with Tim Pride, who's a product designer at Duncan & Jordenston, and Rick Curran, who's a web designer in Dundee. Here's a 30-second spot that we put together to advertise Neon Nights for the art festival that it took place at. So as you may have seen from that, the concept of Neon Nights was very similar to my art exhibitions. Poster sites were used across the city, and this time each of the posters carried a QR code. Each of the posters had a unique QR code, so that when you scanned it, you gained points. Those points were translated onto a leaderboard so that you could track your progress, and that was the basis of the game. The person who had the most points at the end of the week won a prize. To mix things up a little bit, we had some random QR codes in the form of t-shirts and wild cards that were pasted up around the art festival campus, as well as the posters out in the street. And these were introduced to the game partway through the week to maintain interest in the game, but also to allow people who'd already completed the first part of the game to feel like there was something still to aim for and to build interest in it. So that was a traditional style treasure hunt, if you like, using QR codes. And the QR codes was used simply as a mechanism for us to gather the points. A similar idea I did again at another conference, the Game to Learn conference in March. This time, instead of tagging spaces or places, I tagged people. And I was interested in this interaction, how this might work socially, that you would have to ask someone for a QR code. So your introduction to the game was through these posters. You scan that QR code and you were logged in, and you were given the name of a person who was a keynote speaker and at the conference, and a password. So you went and found that person, you gave them the password, and they gave you another QR code, and so it carried on until you'd found about 15 people. Again, there were points associated, so the further you got into the game, the more points you got. And as you can see, there were a few people who struggled and maybe didn't like the idea of having to engage with other people in order to gather these QR codes. But there were many people who, despite the time constraints of the festival setting, they were still able to gather most, if not all, of the points. Right, so one of the things that came out of the Neon Nights and the Superfly Safari was that I wanted to make the QR codes more obviously something that was for the general public and not just a piece of technology like the barcodes on the back of your packet of crisps. I'd seen other QR codes where logos had been embedded within the QR space, so I knew there was a space in there, if I could find it, that was editable, if you like. So this is something that I've investigated a bit further to make them more user-friendly and perhaps build in little clues as to what's behind the QR. I think that one of the factors of the QR code that is really interesting is that it is this mysterious object, and once you know what it is, you want to find out what's behind it, and you want to scan it. So if I can add a little clue built into the QR code itself, I find that quite interesting. And rather than these QR codes that you see and there's simply a web address written underneath, and we could all key in a web address into our mobile devices if we wanted to anyway. So here's one that I did for an events company. This is a QR code that they're now putting on their business cards and various promotional items. And again, it's a little bit more interesting, and if you've got the software, then it's a nice way to engage with their website. This takes that idea a step further. This is a QR code. Again, it works, it's functional, you can scan it, and it's embedded with lots of images. Some of them you can make out, but some are too small, and even if I printed this out A3, then it would still be quite difficult for you to see some of the images. However, if you scan it, then it takes you to a HD version of the photograph, and then you can investigate the images, even the small images that are embedded in a single pixel. And again, it's a different way of engaging with the images, and it's a different way of sort of playing on that mystery idea. And maybe we could develop that idea further and make it so that we could, even on the mobile version, that we could click on those images and investigate them further in their full context rather than the cropped manner in which they've been embedded into the QR code. These are QR codes that I've been inspired by the Totem project, one of the videos that you will have watched already, and it's a way of embedding stories into QR codes and tagging objects with those stories. So this is my kids' playhouse that we've put a QR code on, and when you scan it, it takes you to a Flickr page that is filled with images just relating to the playhouse. But we've also got the same QR on one of my kids' wall. So that it's the same idea, but now it's an online photo album, and they can access it, and visitors to the house can access it. And again, there's a mystery element because you know what is it, but if you scan it, and if you at least know that much, or the kids can tell you what you need to do in order to access it, then you're able to access those images. But those images can constantly be updated by me or by the kids, and you're getting the latest about what's happening in that particular place. And that could be related to all sorts of spaces within the classroom or objects, and it could be a way of sharing stories, not only peer-to-peer, but peer-to-peer when the kids could be years apart, but they're still talking to each other and relating stories when they're at the same age. So, for example, if this was my daughter now, in another 2 years' time, when my son's the same age, they'll be talking to each other at the same age, even though the actual stories were recorded years apart. This is a similar idea. This is a QR code that's attached to our puppet theatre, and it takes you to a video of the very first production that my daughter put on in the puppet theatre. It actually gets all a little bit meta and perhaps is a reflection on the state that we're currently at with digital technology, because the video is a recording of the show that my wife and I were watching in the room, and we're recording on the laptop, but my parents were also watching remotely through the webcam, sort of 300 miles away, and all of that audio and everything is captured in that single video. And then finally, this is one that I'm will be working on in the future, that it's a QR code that will take you to a Google map to show you the places that we've been in the boat and what we've been up to in each of those locations, and images tagged to each of the pins on the Google map. In this case, the canoe could be on the roof rack while we're away from the car. The canoe could be chained up to a tree on the beach while we're having our lunch or whatever, but people could still engage with the content that's been tagged to this boat. So it's another way of sharing, and again, these are examples that I'm using, but I'm sure you can think of ways that you could use the same ideas either in the classroom or in the workplace or whatever it is. So what's the future for the QR code? Is it going to remain the awkward teenager, or is it going to be superseded by some sparkly, spangly alternative? I don't think it actually really matters, and it comes back to the ideas that the QR code of itself isn't that interesting. The best thing that I can see that it's got going for it is that it's free and that there is that mystery element to it. But anything that needs to be scanned in order to access the information behind it will have that mystery quality. So it comes down to the ideas, and the ideas are what drives each of these projects, with perhaps the exception of the picture QR code, where the images and the idea relates purely to the form of the QR code. And maybe the QR code as it is just now is unique in that it comes down to the contrast between the black and the white, and that's what makes it work, and so you can manipulate it in that way. But essentially each of these projects are driven by the idea. The technology could be taken out, the QR could be removed from the project and replaced with a different technology that did a similar thing. The idea would remain the same and remain equally as powerful. So while QR codes are great, and particularly in the fact that they're free, they require good ideas, and this is particularly something that's been talked about in advertising, that too many QR codes are scanned, and then what actually happens behind them isn't at all interesting. It just takes you to another website, or it takes you to their Facebook page. And there will come a point where that side of things, the novelty factor, will wear off, and that won't be interesting. So there's got to be something worthy of the effort that it takes to open your phone and to scan it, and to find something there that maybe you wouldn't find any other way, that it is somehow unique to the experience of someone who's willing to engage with you on that level. So moving forward for me, I've got a couple of projects that bring all of these ideas together. One in Broughty Ferry and one in St Andrews, and both of them will be location-based projects. So the treasure hunt element will be there to a degree. The objects being tagged with stories, and perhaps expand that for the people who are playing the games to share their stories while they're actually in the experience, so sharing images or video or audio, or maybe even text while they're actually in the process, and that could be shared across a network with other people who are engaging in the same experience. The St Andrews one in particular is related to e-tourism, so that would be a perfect idea for people who are new to a city. You know, if you're in New York or Rome or Paris, you're not the only visitor to the city. So for people to be able to share across a network their experiences in real time of as a tourist in a city and places that they visited, and to share that information live, akin to Twitter, but within a space that you can be connected while you're in that space, but then once you leave that space, then you're anonymous to each other and you don't have to follow each other, and all the awkwardness that comes with that. So there's lots of ideas here. None of them are tied necessarily to a QR code, but they are a very effective way at the moment of us to be able to try out these ideas cheaply. So I think this proverb for me encapsulates a lot of what it is I'm trying to achieve through my project at the Masters and ongoing projects in the future. That it all comes down to the storytelling and creating spaces for people to either have a story to tell, or to share that story, to share existing stories, or just to listen to other people's stories. Tell me a fact and I will learn, tell me a truth and I will believe, tell me a story and it will stay in my heart forever. Thank you very much for listening. If you've anything that you'd like to contribute back, or if you have any questions or requests concerning QR codes, please get in touch with me. My email address is there, and other contact details will be below. Thanks very much.